Good morning. My name is Josh Barnett, and I serve as NIET's president. Let me officially welcome each of you to the 2021 NIET National Summer Institute. We are thrilled to be joined over the next 2 days by over 400 educators from across the country. Thank you for sharing part of your summer with us, and we are excited for our theme this year. We know that to maximize student growth, which is our ultimate goal for the work we all do, we need to shift our thinking. Over the last 2 decades, NIT has consistently pushed for seeing learning through the lens of the students by how we observe, coach, and support teachers. To this end, we have taken key steps to focus our attention on the students within the learning process, not only what teachers do or the school leaders who support them do, but what the students in the classrooms are doing. Over the past few months, NIT has worked to update our instructional rubric to strengthen the focus on students and ensure equitable access to high quality instruction. I want to spend just a few moments to share about what you'll see in the updated rubric. Let me begin with the updated name. Our rubric is now formally titled the NIT Teaching and Learning Standards Rubric. This change reflects NIT's targeted focus on student learning outcomes and student ownership. The name mirrors the shift in the language, which places more emphasis on what students are doing and learning. In the instruction and planning domains, you'll see updated language that shows what it looks like for students to lead their learning, such as a deeper emphasis on evidence in student work and student-centered descriptors. In the environment domain, you'll see additional clarity on the strategies that build a positive and inclusive classroom environment. This item is what we will dig into more over the next 2 days. Today, we will unpack how these shifts look in our own language and collaboration. Tomorrow, you will have the option to choose sessions focused on leadership and coaching or on the classroom environment. And as a reminder, you will have access to all recordings of all sessions for the next 90 days. As we officially begin, we thought it only fitting to hear from students themselves on what student ownership means to them. I want to introduce NIET's Chief Executive Officer, Dr. Candice McQueen, to share some remarks and facilitate our Student Voices panel. Dr. McQueen began her role as CEO in January 2019. In Dr. McQueen's first year, she led a vision setting and strategic planning process for our organization called NIET Now. And since then, she has overseen the growth of NIET's work. Specifically, she has expanded our partnerships to reach new states and support more educators. Her leadership facilitated the expansion of NIET services to provide more dedicated support across the educator pipeline, including specific services for aspiring teachers, district leaders, and principals. Further, over the past 18 months, she has spearheaded NIET's transition to release more open source materials and provide virtual professional learning to advance NIET's mission to focus on providing impactful opportunities for all students. Please welcome NIET CEO, Dr. Candice McQueen.
Thank you, Josh. I want to express my appreciation as well to the 400 plus educators who are joining us over the next 2 days to dig into student ownership. Thank you for joining us this morning. We believe that deepening our teaching and leading practices to foster student ownership can be a powerful lever for acceleration and growth as we come out of the pandemic. All of us know that investing in people, not a program, is what can drive transformative change. I hope you will find that the next few days will allow you to reset and refocus on what it means to invest in teachers and students as we move into the new school year. I want to start for just a minute to share a bit more about what we mean by student ownership as it pertains to the updates in our NIET rubric. Student engagement and student ownership are terms that we often use interchangeably. While both are critical, student engagement is not our highest learning destination. Our goal is to actually reach student ownership. Student engagement reflects what students are doing and understanding about their learning. We often see student engagement as level 3 or level 4 on the NIET Teaching and Learning Standards rubric. Student ownership takes that learning a step further. When students own their learning, they know how to apply what they are learning in different contexts and take responsibility for their progress. If students don't own their learning, accelerating their learning will prove much more difficult. When we were considering how to focus our National Summer Institute after the year we just had, we wanted to start by centering on what we know is most important: high quality teaching and learning. We believe if we foster opportunities for students to take ownership, and if we support teachers in reaching that deeper level of instruction, then our schools will be much more successful. It may even make teaching and learning more fun. Throughout the next 2 days, we will invite you to come back to the central idea of what student ownership looks like. We encourage you to take advantage of the planning time we have at the beginning and end of each day to think about that application, whether you're here by yourself or you're here with the team. This will help you feel more centered on the idea of student ownership as you enter the fall. We want to start by highlighting the voices of student ownership through the students themselves. We have 4 fantastic students who are taking a few minutes of their summer to spend it with us to talk about what student ownership means to them. Let's start by introducing Logan McCleese, a 12th grade student from Meridian High School in Perry Township, Indiana. Ricardo Medina, an 8th grader from Somerset Junior High in Somerset ISD, Texas. Alyssa Biela, 11th grader, also from Somerset ISD, Texas at Somerset High School. And Gabby Martinez, a 9th grader from Landry High School in Louisiana as part of Algiers Charter School Association. Welcome to all of you, and let's start by asking you a question about student ownership. Your job right now is to be a student, but I want to start by asking, what does student ownership mean to each of you?
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone. Student ownership to me is simple, and I break it down into 2 categories. The first category is progress. I think a big part of student ownership is taking the initiative to better yourself, and that is the student wanting to do better, wanting to improve, and wanting to learn. And my second part of that is student involvement. Just us voicing our opinions here on how we love to be taught is super important. Because every school is different and every student is different. So that personal application and that personal voice is super important as well.
Ricardo, what would you add?
Okay. When I hear the phrase student ownership, the word responsibility comes to my mind. And what I think student ownership is basically what us, the students, are responsible for doing in that class that day. I like that with student ownership, what we learn, we can also apply it in other classes and in the real world.
Fantastic. Gabby, would you add anything else?
Yes. I say that student ownership is more like being able to fix your own mistakes from your teacher's feedback or from just reflecting on what you've learned or what I need to know.
Great comment. So, Alyssa, I'm going to turn to you to kind of take this a step further. So, to move to student ownership, we're going to talk a bit this morning about what do teachers need to do so students, as Ricardo said, can fully take responsibility. So, how do you see teachers using feedback, data, teaching strategies, different kinds of assignments that help you better own your learning? And give some examples if you can.
Making expectations very clear, positive feedback, even if you make a wrong answer, just reinforcing that they care about you, creating positive relationships with you, just all in all being there for you.
Fantastic. Gabby, would you add anything to that? What are some things that you see teachers do that help you take greater ownership of your learning?
Definitely the energy that they give off while in the classroom or on a meeting or something, because I feel as if the teacher's energy, of course, affects the student also, because whatever you're giving is what I'm going to give back, of course.
Fantastic. So the word energy. And Logan, I heard you when we were talking about this the other day. You made some comments about some specific projects and things you've seen teachers do that helped you better engage helped you better understand and then take ownership. Can you share some specifics of those projects?
Absolutely. So in my AP Calculus course, a super rigorous course, towards the end of the year, we already had taken the exam. We were assigned a project in which we had to teach a certain subject that we didn't reach to the class. So my teacher instructed us, to break out into groups. We assigned each other different roles, and it was virtual, so it was definitely super odd. It was actually hybrid, so some students were in school and some students were at home. And I think super important things to take away from that were the teacher was in our breakout room every 5 minutes to make sure we were on task. He was ensuring that we were on task and that we were learning and we were on the right track. And I think that's super important. He didn't, leave us to die, and he didn't, just give us the answer. And that really made us and forced us to own our education there. And that's a super valuable experience.
Yeah, so let's stick with virtual learning for just a minute. Though all of you probably experienced some version of virtual learning this last year. So, Ricardo, I think I will start with you. What are some things that your teacher did during virtual learning that helped you engage better and take more responsibility for your learning?
Well, whenever we were on whenever our class was in virtual, one thing our teacher would do a lot was office hours when she couldn't be there at a certain time when we had to go on Zoom. She would also leave certain recordings for us if we didn't understand a assignment, and Google Classroom was a big thing too throughout the school year that we were in virtual.
Great. Alyssa, anything else you'd add?
Holding us accountable for not showing up to Zooms, not participating in activities. We had to show up. We had to be there. We had to have our cameras on. We were just very held accountable, and we had the same expectations as we would if we were not virtual.
Fantastic. And in the virtual environment, Logan, you spoke about breakout rooms. Were there specific strategies like within an instructional lesson that may have been synchronous like we're doing now? Were there things that you saw, Logan, that teachers did that really engaged you beyond breakout rooms?
Absolutely. I know I mentioned this yesterday as well, but polls, just a simple poll, just to ensure that students are paying attention, would go miles. Basic things like that, commenting in the chat, type in your response, or, keep it fun. Like we mentioned energy earlier. What's something you did yesterday that was fun? Just to make sure students are engaged, they're involved. And another thing, from virtual learning that really sticks out to me is accessibility. I think that's super important. If I can contact my teacher with a question and know that they're going to be there, I'm definitely more likely to reach out to them.
That's great. A part of virtual learning and certainly in-person learning that moves students to better own their learning is they need to feel comfortable. They need to feel like they've been welcomed in the classroom by other students, certainly welcomed by the teacher and other adults who may be there. So I'd love to hear from all of you, what makes a welcoming classroom environment where students feel like they can engage deeply in their own learning without fear of being attacked for some belief that they have, or without fear of potentially being in a situation where their comments are not heard. So why don't we start actually, Alyssa, with you? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, when I walk in, I want to smile. I don't want to frown, and I want the teacher to be prepared and ready to teach me. I want positive feedback that builds confidence on how I'm progressing in that class.
Great. So lots of feedback. You want to smile. You want a personal relationship. Well said. Ricardo, what would you add?
Well, I like what she said when you walk in and the teacher is there. She's greeting you, saying good morning, and I like it when the teacher also notices a lot of the little things. Like if I were to get a haircut or a new pair of shoes, the teacher would notice it right away. That means that she is trying to build a bond and a relationship with her students, so her students can build a relationship and a bond with her.
Very well said, Ricardo. And it's interesting what you said, that noticing the little things does matter, and then being able to apply that in a conversation with you later can sometimes make a big difference in your engagement. So, Gabby, would you add anything from your perspective as a high school student? What are teachers doing at the high school level that help you feel engaged?
Yes, definitely the vibes that I would automatically get from the teacher, even the students also, just the vibes that I would get, like everyone else has said, like saying good morning and being greeted and things like that. Like just being able to know that you can engage with me just from me just walking into the classroom.
So, Logan, I'm going to flip this question for you. What are some things that teachers may do? Certainly not at Perry Township where you are, but let's just say teachers generally could do that would not make you feel welcome. What's the flip side of that where you might not engage as deeply or go deeper into your own learning?
Absolutely. So one thing I think, which is a big thing, is no feedback at all. If I answer a question and we move on to the next topic and I'm not receiving any appreciation for that. I think another thing is maybe not making a connection with students. I know we just talked about making connections and how important that is, but if a teacher's monotone is stoic 24/7, it's hard to make a connection with that teacher and apply it to learning, because ultimately that's the goal, is to apply that connection to learning. And I think it's super difficult to do when energy has been a big word used. When the teacher doesn't have energy or isn't engaged or isn't passionate, the students see that, they engage less.
Excellent. Yeah, I think this idea of energy has come up now multiple times. This idea about passionate about the subject matter, giving feedback, certainly important. And I'm curious from, again, I'm going to ask this of all of you, what are some things in that, I guess, assistance or support that teachers can give if you are struggling with content, struggling with information, struggling with text, that you have seen teachers give that help you go deeper into your learning? And I'm actually going to start with Alyssa, because I heard you use the term, I think, anchor charts yesterday when you were describing a situation. So why don't you describe how your teachers have helped you go deeper when you may have some confusion?
Giving visuals, have anchor charts, which are posters to refer back to. Just go over the lesson, have videos posted if you're virtual, post YouTube videos on, hey, this is the problem, this is how you do it. Just stuff for students to refer back to refresh their brain.
Great. Logan, would you add anything else?
Absolutely. I know a bunch of my teachers, kind of to make things fun as well, as spice it up every once in a while. I don't need to see notes every single day and play repeat every time I go back to class. Show a YouTube video, show a clip from a movie that we can relate to. Do something that is going to actively, help me internalize that information. And then again, back to accessibility, have that ability to be reached after school. Do you need some time during lunch, or a time where we can just focus on you and see what you need to work on? I think that one-on-one interaction is super important as well.
Ricardo, what would you add?
Well, I would say that every morning when we walk in, usually in my ELA class, we have a little warm-up called a daily must-do every day. And it basically refreshes us and gives us a little bit of a preview of what we're going to do in the class today, or sometimes it'll be what we did the previous day, just to get kids to wake up and to understand a little bit more of what was going on.
So, Gabby, I'm going to turn it a little bit for you. So if you were in a classroom where you did not feel like, again, you were engaged, it goes back to not being welcome, where I asked Logan to give some examples of when you might not feel welcome. Let's go back to now flipping that a bit to you're not engaged. What's going on in that classroom, and maybe what's the teacher doing? What vibe, we use that word, is the teacher giving off where students might not be engaged at a high level in their learning?
I mostly feel like when I'm in the classroom and the teacher isn't giving me any type of activities while learning. Like, for example, like Logan was saying, something that I would let me and other students would be able to engage in, like watching a clip on YouTube, like he said, or just playing any type of game or a group activity or things like that. But if a teacher doesn't really do things that makes a student feel as if they can be active in the classroom, then that's probably something that I would look at.
Yeah, you might shut down and not be as engaged if you're not seeing that activity and engagement level in grouping or projects, or certainly you said even videos, things that catch your attention that can bring your learning even deeper. So for the group, I'd love to hear some examples of ways teachers you feel like have pushed you to own your learning, maybe something specific, and a specific example of topics you were engaged in, work that you were doing where you felt like you had that engagement that ultimately led to you owning the learning to a point where you could actually teach the learning to someone else. Logan used the great calculus example, so I'm going to come back to you, Logan, for maybe another one. But Ricardo, do you have an idea of something you could share with the group?
Yes, ma'am, I do. This past year, we were working with high advanced poetry in my ELA class, and I personally was not getting it as well as some of the other students were. And so my teacher, she would come by and she would not give me the answer, but push me to my greatest point to where I could understand what was going on and not be confused throughout the lesson.
How did she do that? Give us some ways that she pushed you.
She would point out little areas where I needed help on, and she would tell me, like, if you need help, just come to me and I'll help you out a little bit. I'm not going to give you the answer, but I'm going to like help motivate you and show you what you need to work on.
Great. So great prompts, and she recognized that for additional support. Great example. Alyssa, what would you add?
I would add in Miss Mendoza's class this year, which is my Algebra 2 class, I've always been horrible at math, and I was able to take stuff out of this class and actually go out and teach to other classes. And what helped me teach with my other classes was I wouldn't be able to just sit there and watch her write it out on the board. I'd have to watch her write it out and do my own problem using her own steps. I'm very hands-on. So I'd have to watch the visual and do it myself.
Great. So she turned it over to you to do.
Yes.
You had to take responsibility for that, going back to that R word we used earlier. Great,
Yes.
Great example. All right, Gabby, what would you add?
Definitely, for example, over quarantine when we were on Zoom and things like that, in my social studies class, while we were learning, my teacher actually decided that she was gonna make us do a scavenger hunt around our own house, and she wanted us to find things that related to the subject that we were learning or the topic that we were learning, and we would have to find things and tell her about how this related to the topic, or how this, how this came together, how all of it came together, and how it reflected on the topic. And I feel like that made it really way more hands-on, because we can't really do much since we were over a meeting. But if it was in a classroom, it would have been different. So I guess this was a way to help us be more engaged in things while in class.
Great. Another great virtual example, but one that can be applied to the classroom. It sounds like you were doing, which clearly is the first level of ownership. There was clear action, and it was a little novel, something new that you were getting to engage in as well. When you did this particular work or project, did you get feedback on it at some point from your teacher?
Yes, of course. But it was more of a hands-on group activity. So it was like, not only did we get feedback from her, but we also got feedback from our peers.
Fantastic. What a great example. So you were learning not only from your teacher, but from your peers. So I'm going to put you on the spot, Gabby. Did you learn as much from your peers as you did from your teacher in that moment?
Yes, I feel like, because we had to, usually when we're in the classroom, it's more of like we can understand better. But since we were on virtual, it's like we had to help out each other more. Mm-hmm. Of course, because we couldn't, like I said, we couldn't do as much. So since we had each other and we could give feedback to each other, that helped build a lot. Like, that helped build more of our knowledge, and that also helped build more of a relationship that we had with our peers.
Great. Well said. All right, Logan, bring it home. What's something else that you feel like your teachers do, some very specific activities that you could point to that are engaging?
Absolutely. So to enter the science realm here for all my science teachers, labs are awesome. In my AP physics course this year, we were shooting almost like a rocket type thing, and we'd put a tennis ball in it and we had a target. So something my teacher did to make it, super fun was have a competition, right? Who can be the most precise with their measurements and who can make it to where we hit the target right on the dot. So that competitive atmosphere, just the lighthearted move, kind of removes the social pressure from that situation. And I think it got a lot of students to get more involved. The competition was super, super awesome. And we were working in groups as well. So we're learning off of our peers. We're seeing different perspectives. And perspective is crazy. It's such an important word. I think a lot of times it's overlooked. How my friend learns is definitely different than how I learn. And maybe it's different than how the teacher teaches. So that idea of perspective and that I saw that in that physics lab is super awesome.
So this is a lightning round question. So I'm on a scale of 1 to 10. I want you to think about your favorite teacher. Okay, your favorite teacher you've ever had, and it could be 1 or 2. So you could composite them as 1 or 2 people that you'd say is one person. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being they were very engaging, 1 being they were not engaging. Your favorite teacher, where are they on a scale of 1 to 10? Alyssa?
Probably a 10.
Probably a 10. Ricardo?
I have to say a 10.
A 10. Gabby?
Definitely a 10.
And Logan?
If 11 was a choice, I would choose it.
Okay, so this is a trick question, right? Your favorite teachers you typically go to and you say those folks were very engaging. It may be in lots of different styles and lots of different ways, but they were engaging. So this is your chance to tell 400 educators what are the things you like to do most that maybe this favorite teacher did that is the most engaging. Give some descriptions of the types of things you need as a student that engage you, that help you understand, that lead you to student ownership. What are those? And Logan, we're actually going to start with you this time.
Absolutely. So I think the number one thing is accommodating everyone in the classroom. Everyone's going to learn at a different pace. Everyone's going to struggle at some point, but just being innovative with how they teach. We mentioned YouTube clips earlier. The monotony of the classroom, I think, is what drives students away from learning so much. And I think if you just spice it up once in a while, and of course it's difficult, we recognize that as students. It's not an easy thing to do. A lot of these teachers have been teaching for a very long time and they do it the same way. But being innovative, changing things up a bit, I think that goes miles in students' engagement and students' desire to learn.
Fantastic. All right, Gabby, what do you think?
Definitely being able to know what I can do and what I'm capable of doing, or like being able to help my own peers, especially in classes like ELA and things like that, because me knowing that I'm able to do this is me knowing that I'm able to put myself out there and being able to have some type of ownership when it comes to different types of things.
Great. Alyssa?
Creating relationships with your students. Don't just have them as a student, have them as your student. Have them as someone you know outside of school. Understand what their interests are and what makes them themselves.
Great. All right, Ricardo, you get the final word. What would you say?
Well, I would say not to just always be taking notes and have the students be looking at a board the whole time and while you stay up there and talk. I think that it would be good for teachers to start doing more activities like group work and projects. And I just think that not taking like notes all day, every day is not very good. And I think that if we were to do more project-based learning activities, it would be a lot better.
Great. Yeah, and I think what you're describing is moving from this sort of more passive way you learn to more active. And that is truly how you begin to move toward the teacher as the facilitator and the student is really owning that learning. So very well said. I couldn't have said it better. All of you had great comments and description of how you learn and what are some of the activities and strategies your teachers are doing that help you push forward in your own learning. So let me say thank you. Gabby, thank you. Ricardo, Alyssa, Logan. It's been a delight to be with you this morning and we appreciate your voice. I want to say, as we start collectively with the 400 plus educators who are joining us today, as we start transitioning now into our own learning, I hope you will keep the student voice in mind. What are they telling us about what we actually need to do as instructors to ensure that we truly do move their learning forward in ways that they can engage, they can understand, and they can own their learning? Our first session begins in a few minutes. It begins at 10 a.m. Central Time. So we hope you'll take a very quick stretch break and then come right back to dig into the language of student ownership with all of us gathered today. We have another general session tomorrow at noon Central. This is when we're going to have a chance to talk about the economic impact of this past year and what the shift to student ownership could do for our full recovery and growth. You'll also want to make sure you join us for that discussion in addition to a great conversation that will follow. And by the way, we're also going to offer 3 door prizes for those in attendance, so don't miss it. We will also be offering door prizes, by the way, throughout the day today and tomorrow, so be in attendance, be fully present, and you do have to be present to win. So make sure you stay all the way through our sessions and engage with us in our learning. Thanks again for joining us this morning, and have a great rest of your day at the 2021 National Summer Institute.